Did you think this season couldn't be more explosive? Zero chance. First, a discarded RB emerges as the new symbol of culture with a transformation so brutal, Quinn calls him the team's DNA, and it's not for his game. Second, our millionaire CB faces his last chance. Either he becomes elite again, or he'll be the fraud that sank PETERS. And the coaches are hiding facts that would chill you. Third, PETERS activates the defensive bomb, a DE with double-digit sacks that would collapse the pocket alongside Sweat, but only if we move now. Want to know how all this links? The future of the NFC East is decided in the next 5 minutes. Hit play, subscribe, and get ready. The clock ticks and DC is about to blow up the NFL. I'll start with a question that's been asked all week. How on earth did Chris Rodriguez Jr. not only survive the cuts, but now Dan Quinn talks about him as an integral part of the team's future? Just 10 days ago, all the experts had Rodriguez out of the 53-man roster. Pro Football Focus gave him 0 chances of staying. ESPN didn't even mention him in their final projections. And now it turns out Dan Quinn says he's precisely the type of player that defines Washington's culture. Let me explain to you what happened here, because this story is much deeper than it appears on the surface. First, let's go to the cold numbers. Rodriguez had 52 carries in the preseason for 238 yards, averaging 4.6 yards per carry. That doesn't sound spectacular, right? But stay, and here's what's important. Rodriguez had 0 fumbles throughout the preseason. 0. In a position where ball security is everything, this guy showed absolute consistency. Now, Quinn was super specific about why Rodriguez earned his spot. Consistent is when someone repeatedly shows they're willing to make an effort, find the right red. Not only physical ability, but also mental on special teams. But do you know what really impresses me? Rodriguez's physical transformation this offseason was brutal. This guy lost 15 pounds of fat and gained 8 pounds of lean muscle. He worked with a specialized nutritionist all summer, completely changed his diet, cut out processed sugars, woke up at 5 in the morning for extra cardio. And Larry Izzo, our special teams coordinator, told me something that blew my mind. Chris not only plays his position in punt coverage, but he studies all the positions. He comes to my office after each practice asking what he can improve. Quinn mentioned a specific example that I love. Yesterday, he was reviewing the punt with another player playing on the wing. It's the same spot where Chris normally plays. So that move he executed, he knows what pressures him. And then I thought it would be a great example of Jeremy Reeves and him reviewing things that could be problematic for other players. Do you realize what that means? Rodriguez isn't just perfecting his own game. He's raising the level of the entire special teams unit, identifying weaknesses in other players and helping them improve. That is real leadership, but there's something deeper here that most people aren't seeing. Rodriguez represents exactly the mindset Quinn is trying to instill in the entire organization. Do you remember the Washington locker rooms in past years? Drama, egos, players pointing fingers at each other. Quinn perfectly described what he saw in Rodriguez during the preseason. I saw him in the preseason games when he got excited when Jackery Krosky-Merritt made a big play against Cincinnati, and also when he was focused on himself. That doesn't always happen, but I love his fight. When was the last time we saw a Washington player genuinely excited for a teammate's success, who is technically their direct competition? Rodriguez and Krosky-Merritt are fighting for the same roster spot, yet Rodriguez celebrated his rival's good plays. Now let's talk about his specific role in Cliff Kingsbury's attack. I have been talking to sources within the team, and they tell me that Rodriguez has demonstrated specific skills that perfectly complement what we have with Brian Robinson Jr. and Austin Eckler. Robinson Jr. is our power back, the guy who goes between the tackles and crushes defenses. Eckler is our receiver back, the specialist in third downs and passing situations. But what happens when we need someone who can do both things decently? Rodriguez has shown in practice that he can effectively run both inside zone and outside zone. He's demonstrated reliable hands in the backfield, catching 38 out of 40 passes thrown at him during the preseason. And here's the most important thing. He has the football intelligence to read coverages and find the soft spots in zone coverage. Kingsbury has been experimenting with specific packages where Rodriguez comes in as the primary back in red zone. situations. Why? Because at 6 feet and 220 pounds, Rodriguez has the size to fight for those crucial yards near the goal line, but he also has the agility to run routes from the backfield. I believe you're going to see Rodriguez in very specific situations this season. Third and short, where we need that physical runner. Goal line situations, where his combination of power and technique can be the difference. And in special packages where Kingsbury wants to confuse defenses with multiple options. Quinn was clear about the expectations. I like that he works so hard to change his body, and those are things that people can continue showing and pay attention to. In reality, Rodriguez has become the perfect example of what it means to earn a place in this new Washington. He's not the fastest, not the strongest, but he's the most prepared. He's the guy who arrives first and leaves last. He's I'll player others respect because they know how much work he put in to be here. And you know what else I love? This guy's humility. In recent interviews, Rodriguez has said, I just want to contribute in any way possible. If that means special teams, perfect. If that means carrying the ball 5 times per game, perfect. I just want to help this team win. This mindset is exactly what Quinn is looking for. Players understand that individual success comes after team success, and Rodriguez gets it better than anyone. If that story impresses you, get ready because what's coming will completely change your perspective on our defense. Listen up! What I'm going to tell you about Marshon Lattimore will define if this 2025 season is historical or becomes a massive disappointment. And I'm not being dramatic, I'm being realistic. When Adam Peters made that trade on November 9th, 2024, sending 3rd, 4th, and 6th round picks from 2025 to New Orleans Saints, we all thought we had solved our biggest problem in the secondary. But you know what? The reality was much more complicated than anyone expected. Joe Corey from CBS Sports just named Lattimore as one of his players in a decisive season. And when I read his analysis, I was chilled. A hamstring injury kept Lattimore out of the first 4 games after the trade. Lattimore, who was still bothered by the hamstring, had tough games against A.J. Brown and Mike Evans in the playoffs. Do you understand the magnitude of that? Our elite cornerback, for whom we paid 3 valuable draft picks, arrived injured and never showed us his true level during the most crucial playoffs in decades. Let's go to the cold numbers that nobody is discussing. Lattimore played exactly 2 regular season games after the trade. 2 games? In those 2 games, he allowed a completion percentage of 68% when targeted. For a player of his caliber, that is absolutely unacceptable. But here's what really bothers me. When the playoffs arrived, Lattimore was clearly compromised physically. In the wild card game against Tampa Bay, Mike Evans cooked him for 143 yards and 2 touchdowns. Evans had been inactive due to injury concerns in the last weeks of the regular season and arrived at the playoffs healthy, while our star cornerback was still limping. Against Philadelphia in the divisional round, A.J. Brown abused Lattimore for 126 yards. Brown ran routes that Lattimore simply couldn't cover because his hamstring didn't allow him to change direction explosively. Now, Corey says something that worries me. The expectation is that a healthy Lattimore recovers the form that led him to 4 Pro Bowl appearances. If that doesn't happen, the Commanders may start regretting the trade. And do you know why that statement scares me? Because Lattimore will turn 28 in May. For cornerbacks, that is the age where you start losing a step. Receivers are getting faster, more athletic, more sophisticated in their routes. Lattimore needs to be 100% physically to compete. But let me explain why this situation excites me enormously. When Lattimore is healthy, this guy is absolutely elite. His career numbers speak for themselves. 95 passes, defended 15 interceptions, 4 Pro Bowl selections. In 2019, when he had his best season, Lattimore allowed just a 52.4 passer rating when targeted. I've been talking to coaches from other teams in the NFC East, and they all tell me the same thing. When Lattimore is healthy, he is the cornerback we worry most about facing. CeeDee Lamb from Dallas, A.J. Brown from Philadelphia, even Malik Neighbors from New York. All those elite receivers have to completely alter their approach when playing against a healthy Lattimore. The difference between having Lattimore at 100% versus having him at 80% is a BSMO. When he's fully healthy, Lattimore can press receivers at the line, can mirror their movements perfectly, has the hip flexibility to stay with any route combination. Dan Quinn told me something in private conversation that stuck with me. A healthy Marshon is the type of player that allows you to call more aggressive coverages. You can put safety help in other areas because you know he can handle the best receiver of the opposing team one-on-one. But do you know what the biggest problem we face is? Lattimore has had recurrent hamstring issues over the last 3 years. In 2022 in New Orleans, he missed 5 games due to hamstring injuries. In 2023, missed 3 games for the same problem. And last year, he came to Washington already compromised. Hamstrings are treacherous. Injuries for cornerbacks because they require explosive changes of direction constantly. A hamstring at 90% means that when a receiver makes a sharp cut, Lattimore will be late by those crucial milliseconds that determine if it's a completion or incompletion. Our strength and conditioning staff has developed a specific program for Lattimore this offseason. Flexibility work, hip flexor strengthening, activation exercises specifically for hamstring health. But the reality is that some players are more susceptible to certain injuries, and Lattimore might be one of them. Now, let's talk about the pressure Lattimore faces this season. PETERS gave up significant draft capital for a player who needs to produce immediately. We don't have time for Lattimore to adapt gradually or recover slowly from injuries. The NFC East has some of the best receivers in the entire NFL CD. Lamb just signed a massive extension and comes in motivated. A.J. Brown proved in the playoffs that he can dominate any coverage. Malik Neighbors was drafted specifically to terrorize secondaries. Giants like Terry McLaurin from our own. All these guys are going to test Lattimore weekly. If Lattimore can stay healthy and return to his Pro Bowl form, Washington suddenly has one of the most dangerous defenses in the NFC. Our pass rush with Montez Sweat and Dorrance Armstrong can get after quarterbacks. Our linebackers improve significantly, and if Lattimore locks down one side of the field, defensive coordinator Joe Witt Jr. can scheme up all kinds of exotic pressures. But if Lattimore struggles with injuries again, if he can't handle top receivers consistently, then that trade becomes a disaster. Those draft picks we sent to New Orleans included a 3rd rounder that could have been a productive player for years. Jeremy Reeves and other safeties are going to have to provide help. But the whole scheme depends on Lattimore being able to handle elite receivers in man coverage. If he can't, then our entire defensive identity has to change. I honestly believe that this is going to be a make or break season for Lattimore's legacy in Washington. If he can stay healthy, if he can return to that lockdown coverage that made him famous, then PETERS looks like a genius, and we have a cornerstone defensive player for years. But if we see more hamstring issues, if we see receivers consistently getting open against him, then we have to seriously question whether trading for injury-prone veterans is the right approach moving forward. The pressure is on, and Lattimore knows it. In recent interviews, he's been saying all the right things. I feel great physically. I'm ready to show what I can really do in this defense. I want to help bring a championship to DC. But words don't matter in September when seedy. Lamb is running a comeback road, and Lattimore needs to make that explosive change of direction to stay with him. Actions matter, production matters, availability matters. This is Marshon Lattimore's moment of truth in Burgundy and Gold. But if you think that pressure is intense, wait to hear what Adam Peters is secretly cooking. Get ready, because this is going to blow your mind. What I'm going to tell you about a possible trade for Kwity Paye not only makes perfect sense, but it could be the smartest move Adam Peters has considered so far. And when you analyze all the factors, you will understand why this trade should happen before the season starts. Mo Moten from Bleacher Report dropped this bomb when he wrote, Washington needs a young defensive end who can line up on all 3. Downs to pressure the pocket and stop the run. Paye isn't a star player, but he's consistent and still has room to grow. But do you know why Moten is absolutely right and why Peters should be making phone calls to Indianapolis right now? Let me break down exactly why this move is genius. First, let's analyze the Indianapolis Colts situation. They selected JT Tuimoloau from Ohio State in the 2nd round of the draft this year. Tuimoloau is a freak athlete, 6'5", 260 pounds, ran a 4.540 at his pro day. The Colts clearly believe that Tuimoloau is their future at defensive end. And what does that mean for Kwity Paye? Paye is entering the final year of his rookie contract. The Colts will have to decide whether they want to pay him big money or let him walk in free agency next year. With Tuimoloau developing and salary cap concerns, trading Paye this year makes financial sense for Indianapolis. Now, let's go to Paye's numbers that have me excited. In the last 2 seasons, Paye has recorded 16.5 sacks. That's an average of 8.25 sacks per season, which is exactly what we need from a consistent pass rusher. But here are the stats that really matter. Paye had 10 tackles for loss in 2023 and 9 tackles for loss in 2024. Do you understand what that means? This guy isn't just a pass rusher, he's effective against the run too. In Cliff Kingsbury's offense, we are going to face a lot of running attacks that try to exploit our defensive ends, and Paye can handle that responsibility. Moton mentioned that Paye isn't a star player, but I disagree with that assessment. At 26 years old, Paye is entering his prime years. Defensive ends typically peak between ages 26 and 29, which means we'd be getting Paye at exactly the right time. Compare Paye's numbers to what we currently have. Dorrance Armstrong had 6 sacks last season. Montez Sweat is productive but needs help opposite him. Clelin Ferrell has been inconsistent. James Smith-Williams is more of a rotational player. We don't have that second consistent pass rusher who can complement Sweat effectively. And you know what the beautiful thing about Paye's skill set is? He's versatile enough to play multiple positions in Joe Witt Jr.'s defense. Paye can line up a 5 technique defensive end, he can kick inside to 3 technique on passing downs, and he can even drop into coverage occasionally in exotic packages. But here's where this trade becomes genius level strategy. Washington has salary cap flexibility to not only acquire Paye, but also sign him to an extension immediately. We're talking about locking up a productive pass rusher through his prime years, rather than waiting until free agency where he'd cost significantly more. PETERS has shown he's willing to trade draft picks for immediate help. The Marshon Lattimore trade, the Laramie Tunsil acquisition, the Deebo Samuel Sr. move, all of these demonstrate that PETERS believes we're in win-now mode. But what would Indianapolis want in return? Based on recent trades, probably a 3rd-round pick and a 5th-round pick, maybe a 4th and a 6th if we can negotiate it down. Considering that Paye would likely sign a 4-year extension worth around $60 million, that trade value is completely reasonable. Now, let me explain why this move fits perfectly with our defensive scheme. Witt Jr. likes to rotate defensive linemen to keep them fresh. Having Sweat, Armstrong, Paye, and rotational guys like Ferrell means we can maintain pass rush intensity throughout entire games. In crucial 3rd down situations, imagine having Sweat coming from one side and Paye coming from the other, with Darren Payne and Jonathan Allen collapsing the pocket from inside. Quarterbacks like Dak Prescott, Jalen Hurts, and Daniel Jones would have nowhere to escape, but the run defense improvement would be equally important. Paye's 10 tackles for loss last season proved that he can set the edge effectively and force runners back inside to our linebackers. With Bobby Wagner and Frankie Louvu cleaning up, suddenly we have a complete front 7. Here's something most people don't realize about Paye. He's incredibly durable. In 4 NFL seasons, he's only missed 3 games total. For a position where injuries are common, Paye's availability is invaluable. You can't game plan around players who aren't on the field. The financial aspect makes sense too. Paye will probably sign for around $15 million per year, which is market value for a productive defensive end, but not elite money. Compare that to what guys like Brian Burns and Josh Sweat got in free agency, and Paye's projected contract is actually reasonable. And do you know what else I love about this potential trade? It would send a message to the entire NFC East that Washington is serious about winning now. Cowboys haven't made significant defensive improvements. Eagles are relying on aging veterans. Giants are still rebuilding. We'd be the only team adding prime talent to an already improved defense. PETERS clearly isn't afraid of making bold moves. Since becoming GM, he's been aggressive in upgrading talent at every position. Adding Paye would complete our defensive transformation and give us one of the most complete units in the conference. The timing makes perfect sense too. Training. Camp has shown that while our defensive ends have been decent, we haven't seen that explosive pass rush consistency that championship teams require. Paye would provide precisely that missing piece. Indianapolis would be motivated to make this deal because they're not competing for a championship this year. Getting draft picks for a player they might lose anyway makes sense for their long-term building plan. For Washington, this trade represents the final piece of Peters' defensive puzzle. We've addressed cornerback with Lattimore, linebacker with Wagner, safety depth with various moves. Adding an elite pass rusher would give us a defense capable of matching up with anybody. I honestly believe that if Peters can pull off this trade, combined with a healthy Lattimore and continued development from our young players, Washington would have a top 5 defense in the NFL. And with Jaden Daniels developing on offense, that combination could be championship caliber. The question isn't whether this trade makes sense. It absolutely does. The question is whether Peters can convince Indianapolis to pull the trigger before some other contending team realizes what a steal Paye would be. Time is running out before the season starts. If Peters wants to make this move, he needs to act fast. Because once the season begins and other teams see what they're missing at pass rusher, the price for Paye is only going to go up. This could be the trade that pushes Washington from playoff team to legitimate Super Bowl contender. That's Burgundy and Gold in its purest form, family. Let's recap these 3 bombshells that will define our 2025 season. Chris Rodriguez Jr. not only survived the cuts, he became the symbol of everything Dan Quinn wants to build. In Washington, his physical transformation, his team mentality, his dedication on special teams, this is exactly the culture we needed. And when you see him carrying the ball in goal line situations this year, remember that you heard it here. First, Marshon Lattimore faces the most important season of his career, period. If he can stay healthy and return to Pro Bowl form, our defense becomes elite immediately. But if we see more hamstring issues, if receivers continue getting open against him, then that trade becomes a cautionary tale. The pressure is massive. But the potential payoff is championship-level defense. And Kwity Paye, this is the move that Peters should make before another team realizes what a steal he would be. At 26, entering his prime, with 16.5 sacks in 2 seasons, Paye would be the perfect complement to Montez Sweat. Indianapolis needs draft picks. We need pass rush. The fit is perfect. But you know what's the most incredible? A thing of all. These 3 stories represent exactly what this organization has become under Peters and Quinn. Rodriguez shows the culture. Lattimore shows the talent acquisition. Paye shows the aggressive pursuit of excellence. 2 years ago, Washington was a joke. Players didn't want to come here. Draft picks were wasted. There was no clear vision. Now, we're the team that other franchises are trying to copy. If Peters can keep Lattimore healthy, if Rodriguez contributes like Quinn expects, if they can pull off the Paye trade, folks, we're talking about a defense that could carry us to the NFC Championship game. And when Dallas struggles with their same defensive problems, when Philadelphia's aging veterans break down, when New York continues rebuilding, we will be the team that took advantage of our window. Is Rodriguez going to surprise people with his contributions? Absolutely. Is Lattimore going to prove he's still elite when healthy? I believe so. Is Peters going to pull the trigger on Paye? Man, I hope so, because that move would be genius. Give it a like if you think Rodriguez will have more impact than people expect. Click subscribe if you believe Lattimore will stay healthy all season. And let me know in the comments if you think Peters should trade for Paye. Right now, tomorrow, we're going to have more explosive news that will shake up the entire NFC East. This organization is building something special, and you are part of this incredible journey. Remember, this is more than football. It's about building a championship culture that will last for years. Rodriguez, Lattimore, potentially Paye. All these moves represent Peters and Quinn's vision coming to life. Hail to the Redskins, and see you tomorrow with more Burgundy and Gold explosions.